All right, welcome everyone. This panel is Songs of the Smallfilk.
Hello.
That is the mastery level of puns that we put in our songs. Is coming up with Songs of the Smallfilk. It's not great. We worked with it. If anyone has a better suggestion for next year, please give it. What we'd like to do is kind of go down and introduce everyone. We want to start with Haley?
Okay. Hi, I'm Haley Bowery, and I am the singer and writer for the band The Manimals. We have a concept album called Seven, which is about Song of Ice and Fire, told from 7 different perspectives per song. I've also done some other fandom music with my band. We did like some silly rap stuff and also like covers of Bear and the Maiden Fair and things like that.
Hi, I'm Mo. I've been Ice and Fire a bunch of times and done Clegane Bowl rap performances as the Hound, and I was the Hound in the musical. And that's kind of, yeah. Stop. She's in a band and like, we're changing costumes like every song.
We're not at the praising each other part of this.
We're clapping for both of you.
Like, I'm just like, and I guess we talked about it. Just like, I made some clever rap songs.
Here, I'll give Mo the intro he deserves. So, I'm Dom. I've been to Ice and Fire Con since the first year. It was my very first con. And yeah, where if anyone has heard the Symphony story, where I like blacked out and freestyled a Podrick Payne erotica. We're not talking about that.
Pain is the measure of deserves pain.
That's one of the videos that, like YouTube videos, you need the link to see because that is not public. But in the third year at the con, when I was just like the Mountain, entirely ripping off the rapper Dominic Omega, I did a little rap called "The Mountain That Rhymes," and won the performance contest last year. That was the last year I was allowed to be in the performance contest. Then I was voluntold to host the performance contest after that.
Gotta get somebody else a chance, sir.
Yeah, and then that next year, I was completely blindsided. If you see the video of Mo's rap battle, I'm shouting. I'm sitting there like, we're out of nowhere. The next year, Mo decided he was going to turn this into beef and do the Hound rap battle. So then to squash all beef in year 5 of Ice and Fire Con, he was the Hound, I was the Mountain, and Brian was Kyburn. And so I will pass that on to my 75-25 co-writer of the musical from last.
We Matt Damon and Ben Affleck did.
Yeah, basically.
We're both screenwriters.
I'm gonna pass this on to the guy that did most of the work in the musical, Brian.
The musical, guys, come on, bitch.
Hi, my name is Brian. My entry into all of this was the year that Dom did The Mountain That Rhymes. I realized he was like, can you beatbox in the background? So I had like a beat to go on. I'm like, yeah. Actually, I have a yellow shirt and a yellow hat. So I was like his beat boy hype man as he did The Mountain That Rhymes. So I was tangentially related to all of this. So then in year 3, when they needed, it's like rap battles of history, someone comes in 2/3 of the way through to close it. And they're like, Brian, we're volunteering you, you're Kyber. Write some verses and get ready.
Hey, you also in between that you did the once I was 16 years old.
Okay, yes, I did a Jamie Lannister Once I Was 7 Years Old parody.
Which he won, by the way.
He won that year.
He won that year. I did the rap and everyone's like, you did that. I'm like, well, Brian won.
And then
I forgot about that.
I forgot about that. And then I did You're Welcome from the perspective of Benioff and Weiss.
But last
night is the culmination of voluntelling. Kara and I came upon a unauthorized recording of Hamilton online and watched that July 4th because it was patriotic and we liked Moana, so we hadn't seen any Hamilton stuff or heard any, and we watched it and it was great. I had to look up on my phone to double check this. July 7th, as I was about to leave work, I told Tara, hey, I gotta show you something when I get home. I had done the lyrics for I'll Be Back, which was the Daenerys Targaryen song as King George. And I was like, you got to do this for Ice and Fire Con. Like, they'll love this. And she told me I had to do a musical. So, like, went through several rewrites, but the first thing I did was go, Dom, I need you for something. And my recruitment thing for Dom was another version. This was when it was going to be way more just Game of Thrones, the first book. And so like right-hand man, instead of Hand of the King, it was actually Robert recruiting Ned. So it was, have I wronged you, your grace? On the contrary, I'm making you hand because being king is beyond scary. With John Aaron dead, the hand can be no other. He was like my father, Ned, and you're my brother. Don't get me wrong, I know we had our spats, but you know we have to move past those dead dragon brats. You're wasted up here in the north. Robert, this is my home. I want you would refuse. I'm not. We had such dreams when we were younger, unfulfilled. As John Aaron said, what the king dreams, the hand builds. The Smallfilk put it another way. Now what was it? The king eats and the hand takes the ship. Why are you asking me this? I'm being honest. I still mourn your sister Lyanna that I was promised. Our families were meant to unite as one. Now you have a daughter and I have a son. Done?
You want a little deleted scene? You want to do a review?
We're on extra features.
Yeah.
We got an hour. And so that was the first version of it, and it was a lot of throwing the lyrics into a Google Doc, and like, Dom, this one's what do we got? And I come back and like I'll have just space fillers, like I don't know what goes in this verse, and I come back and there is an amazing verse. Like the whole opening thing was Dom, King Robert Baratheon. Like I did touch-ups, and it was my first time in Google Docs figuring out how to do the little note tab, like. Should this be sort of ill and painful versus Axe? What did he have? Oh, he has sword. Okay, we'll change that. And the second version, when we realized to more closely match it with Hamilton Act 1, was Altyrion. It was like Altyrion all the time. I think the opening number was Lannister named Tyrion. Lannister named Tyrion.
Still hate how that scans.
It's not great. And you know, reading the Chernow Hamilton book, his nickname during the war was Little Lion, so that was kind of a sign. And then that kind of moved into what we had, which was a cast that rapidly got up to like 14 people, including recruiting people like 2 weeks before.
Hi, Daisy.
Hi, Daisy. But no, it was a process. It was great. Technical difficulties aside, that was trying to get all the lyric videos done. When we found out we would have a projector and could put them on screen, I thought that would be nice. Next year we'll have time to rehearse and go through and make sure everything's good.
So that means there's a follow-up?
NDA. You're all NDA.
We won't break the NDA. Someday.
I've been advised by Brian on threat of not being
Our lawyer.
I cannot disclose that information.
Yeah.
Nor would I.
But we're doing, but yes, we're doing it like action.
Hell yeah. Well, we were just discussing, we could talk about, well, Brian kind of got into why he decided to write it. So we were thinking we'd talk about why we chose to write fandom, music, and raps, and the like parodies and non-parodies. For me, my thing was I had been watching the show and then I started reading the books, and when I ran out of content, I was sort of just like desperate for more and to sort of like put myself into the story, and so I thought it would be interesting to do a concept album where my original plan was to make it a secret and not tell anyone it was about Song by Fire, and like just have like little breadcrumbs throughout it. Like one of the first things I wrote was a Daenerys song, and I was like, what if I like talked about home as a house with a red door? And but you know, only someone who knew Song of Ice and Fire would have caught that. As the album progressed, they became more obvious, and to the point where I was like, oh, I wrote a song about Arya where I literally say like, yeah, I'm the wolf bitch. And so I was like, yeah, okay, so now it's just out there. It's a record about Game of Thrones. And but it came from a place of like picking out universal themes and wanting to express some of my own stuff through the characters' emotional arcs. So that's why I did that thing. And then after that, the other stuff I did, like parodies, like did this rap about Harrenhal, but things like that just came out of like wanting to make
Beastie Boys sabotage.
Yeah, it's sabotage and
like fake, like they had sunglasses and fake mustaches and all of it.
Oh yes, watch the music video.
It's on YouTube and it's amazing.
Things like that. But yeah, that was just like, once I was sort of like into that, I didn't think anyone would really listen to Seven, and then so I wrote it 2 years ago, and then it wasn't until last year I played at this con, and it was then I sort of felt like I kind of became a little bit of a part of something, which was very neat, and after that then I started making all this other stuff. Yeah.
So I spent a good chunk of my con life before, like, you know, I did, what is it, year 3 was my first, yeah, and so I knew nobody, which was really scary. And then all of a sudden everyone was all super friendly, and that was cool. And then Dom comes on with the rap battle, and I was the only hound at the time, so I'm like, well, okay, this ought to be interesting. And then so I wake up hungover for a Sunday morning. I miss saying goodbyes because I'm like, I have to go sing an opera. But I'm driving like, 5 hours back, and I'm just like, it's like I could feel the wheels turning. I'm like, I gotta start doing something, and I had the core of it. I couldn't remember which lines I had in my head, but I'm like, I gotta figure these out, and I'm gonna do it next year. And then Sunday morning, I'm working out the bones of it. And so yeah, I wrote it all out one time, and then I just kept saying it every day, and every day. But yeah, I'm like, all right, I got it written down. I'm just gonna read it every day, or sing it to myself every day until the next Ice and Fire Can. And I did, and that was the first time I ever performed in front of anybody. I mean, like, like school plays don't count, but we're like, oh, a bunch of con folks. I'm like, all right, let's do it. And I forgot a few of the lines, but people still liked it, and that was cool. And then yeah, the next year, like Don messaged me, and he's like, let's do it together. I'm like, I have to think of stuff, I don't have to think of stuff on my own, and less to memorize. Perfect. And so we did that, and then of course I got kind of recruited as being, well, Josh is the other hound, but Josh wasn't here. But I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of the only hound that shows up, so I kind of got put into the hound role for the musical, which was super cool. And so yeah, it's just kind of just feeding off of everybody else's energy here, because it's super cool that way. And people like it, so yeah.
So I wrote the Mountain That Rhymes rap verse in 8 minutes at dinner at Ice and Fire Con 3. Sorry, Mel. It's like you're talking about, I've been working on it for a year. I'm like, yeah, I kind of sat down with like pen and paper as I was eating dinner, and like, do you guys, if any of you are old enough to remember Craig, Craig, one of the original like Stag soccer hooligans, he was like, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, I'm doing like my performance thing. And he's like, you haven't done that? I'm like, yeah, no, I guess I haven't. But I kind of like scribbled that together, and I didn't remember it either. You can like see that in like, if you've seen the video of me doing the original mountain rap, like I'm just like repeating lines and just like trying to get like the crowd hype until I can remember what comes next. I say crushing your skull like I was the Red Viper like 3 times, but like every time I say it, everyone's like, ooh. So I'm like, yes, keep going. I'll remember the next line. I think I was just like so floored that that Mo just like threw the gauntlet at me the next year, that I feel like I might have like that night, like at the Flea Bottom Fete that night, just been like, okay, next year,
yeah,
we're doing the Hound the Mountain, we're doing the Clegane Bowl.
It basically became a thing, because like I said, like 30 Vice and FireCon, I was the Hound, he was the Mountain. It was like, okay, so we need to be friends now.
Yes, yeah, no, yeah, we are doing this.
Did we just become best friends?
Oh my god, did we just become brothers?
Basically.
What I don't remember, Brian, how did you get involved as Kyber? No, I do not remember that.
You recruited me. There was a Facebook message that all of a sudden I'm in a Facebook group with you two, and you're like, Brian, you're Kuiper. We're doing, this is on the deal, we're doing like a back and forth epic rap battles of Clegane.
Yeah, I remember that phrase.
And we need a closer. Can you do like 8 bars?
And that's why I was like, I was totally down for it because Dom did cool. And then like Brian did it before, and I was like, all right, because like I said, it's less things for me to memorize. And I know they can perform in like improv and the funny and better on stage and most of these things. So I'm like, of course, just include whoever we need, and they killed it. And then we did a bit of rehearsal before, like the day before.
We actually rehearsed more for that than we did for the music.
Ryan, I have a question about that rehearsal.
Yeah.
Last year, it was right after the Manimals played. The three of us stepped
we all
outside.
had our phones with our lyrics, and we were sitting in the little triangle. And it was like looking like, here, don't look.
Here's the question I have for Brian, though. Here's the question I have for Brian. You laughed at every joke when we did that rehearsal last year, as if you were hearing it for the first time. Had you read it?
Not so much. I kind of I figured you guys were just going to do stuff.
Which was fun because what is it? At the musical backstage, Megan, who was on Melisandre, who was amazing. She's not here. She's costuming, but I guess she hadn't heard what he sent out. She liked the MP3s, and like the last one was the whole damn thing. I'm like, good thing. And so like Megan hadn't heard the whole damn thing, and so when King Robert Baratheon goes on, she is losing her goddamn.
Wait, seriously?
Yes, she is losing. Is her and Chloe and Elena. I was like, oh, they don't dig it. It was great. I was because of this this performative like collective energy is like a really cool thing.
And that's it's the collaborative process is fun, and you touched on this earlier. When you come up with one line and it leads to the song. Like for King Robert Baratheon, all I knew is I wanted King Robert Baratheon. He is still alive as anyone, but just you wait, just you wait. And kind of the song was built around that.
Yeah, not for me at least. Regarding the same, like the thing that stuck was on the one we were coming up with them. Like, okay, and the first thing I said was, Sandra Clegane, been digging graves. I'll push you in one. We're like, yes, all right, we're now cooking, and it's just going.
To be honest, that line for me in the Westeros musical, I just knew I wanted what is the line in actual Hamilton? Like reading like every book he could get his hands on. I knew I wanted that to be waking 3 times in a night to piss into a bowl. That's all I needed out of music. My absolute favorite King Robert line.
That was actually my favorite line from that song. And at some point, "Wait for it" was Cersei. When it was Tyrion, when it was going to be the Tyrion musical. Cersei was much more of all of the Aaron Burr parts. They're allies, they're on the same side, but they are not friends, and they are eventually enemies. It was going to work well, but it's such a good song as a song, and that was part of the reason we made the switch, was a lot of songs just work so much better for characters outside of the Lannister family.
I believe I demanded Farmer Refuted.
Yes,
the show.
Farmer Refuted was originally not even going to be in it, and I'm so happy that we did it, because that ended up, that's a very complex song to do, because everything Stannis sings, all of those phonemes, all of those sounds have to match something that Cersei sings later twice as fast. So that was a work to put together, but then Dom just murdered that song.
Here's my like weird confession. Farmer Refuted is my favorite song in Hamilton.
Oh yeah.
Wow, other people with this opinion for once.
I think it's funny to make Stannis Baratheon Samuel Seabury, because
Yeah.
historically they have about the same importance.
Show's not canon.
Oh, yeah, I had to put notes in the script at some point when Tyrion, when he makes Bronn head of the City Watch, put my guy on the inside if I can count on his ally. I had to put a note in the script, like a little asterisk, and at the end of the script, yes, I know this is only in the show, we're doing it.
I think I remember that in the doc somewhere.
Yeah.
But, and speaking of notes, for the 7 album.
Yes,
Haley.
Yes.
Haley actually has.
The one who's in a band.
Well, but here's the. Is it Rap Genius?
Yeah, Rap Genius. I used. Well, now it's called Genius. I think, because it's
Genius.com.
more than just rap now. So it's a site where you can.
Genius.
Right. It's yeah. I used it for filk, but which is a word I did not know before.
No.
I was like calling it what I did songfic or something like that. I didn't know what it would be, but so I use this site Genius, which is like you can like highlight and annotate word by word, phrase by phrase through a song, and people were using it for rap music to be like pick apart people's cool metaphors and stuff like that, or like what they're actually referencing. So I used that for 7, and I put all my lyrics on there, and so like. Yeah, you can go through and like click on a phrase and it'll give you the little backstory of like what that is from books or show in some cases, and about the characters with like, you know, silly gifs and memes and stuff too. But yeah, so that was a fun thing that I got to do like after I did like the poetry part, to just be like, hey guys, like this is what it all means, and just nerd out on myself, I guess.
Oh no, yeah, well, and let's us too. I think actually the first time I met you, I fanboyed a little bit. I was like, I went through Genius on 7, and it was amazing, and on this one, I can't remember which song I talked to you about, but yeah, when I first downloaded the album, I was trying to find the lyrics, and I found those, and it's like, oh my gosh, she has like everything. She has thoughts on all of this. This is amazing, and it's worth checking out.
The way you actually get on this panel is if you have written the 7 Rap Genius, or if you've read every line on the 7 Rap Genius. That's how you get on the stage.
Those are the prereqs.
Yeah.
Right.
or if you're Mo.
If you got a good one line up. Sure, okay.
That's the show.
When you nail it, you nail it. It's
Like, I'm just like, you know, I'm like the clumsy guy with the hammer. Like, I don't know, I'm terrible with it, but if I get it, it's done, you know.
So I don't know.
Yeah,
Let's
we've
open
got
the
like a
floor to
half hour.
questions.
Yeah.
Just ask around and
Actually, yeah, this is for Haley. This was, listening to 7 was the first thing that I had for getting hyped for SFireCon last year.
good.
Awesome. Yeah, it's the first time I came, it was so awesome. And I was just wondering, because what struck me about the whole album was kind of the emotional distillation of all the characters, and how much you kind of compressed so many important thematic elements into such a short, into a much smaller format. So I was wondering how you went about deciding who you were going to do.
Okay, so yeah, 7 different characters, 7 songs. I did, for people who don't know, I did Dany, Arya, Jon, Tyrion, Cersei, Brienne, and Bran. And my original plan was, I was like, well, I was sort of at a point, I think like season 5 had just ended, no more books, and so like I was thinking about like, well, who's alive, who do I really love, and I also thought about like George's children from like his original pitch, and I sort of did that. I didn't do Sansa, but still would kind of like to. But then when I got down to it, I was like, well, I want to throw in Cersei because I find her really interesting, and like probably my favorite thing is her point of view in Feast. So I just thought she's just so like that, and then Brienne is just another favorite of mine, and I was like wanted some more chicks in there too, and so when it came down to it, like I was like, fuck, I have Bran, like, to do. And it was the last song I wrote, and I was like, what am I gonna talk about as Bran? And I mean, there was like information sort of leading to what Bran was gonna do, sort of, but I'm like sort of a little pleased with myself now, because my idea was, I was like, well, what if he just sums up the story and he tells it from everybody's point of view, because he knows everybody's history, and that's sort of what's happening on the show right now. So I'm like stoked on that I like was right and didn't totally go off base. But so in that one, I took all of the musical themes from everybody else's songs and used them like in reprise for Bran. But in terms of like distilling emotional content for characters, I really tried to pick just some moment where they had a really difficult choice, or where something urgent was songs need to have forward motion, and otherwise you're just kind of like singing about feelings, which is great sometimes, but to give them that power of like, yeah, like I wanted it to be, you know, Arya either like both heading to Bravos and leaving Bravos and being like, now's the time, you know, and or like, you know, I think this is like where I'm gonna like learn my skills and that sort of thing. And then with John, I picked him and Egret, actually. So like that was, I was thinking about his as a love song, but something that really compromised his morality and made him, yeah, like, you know, it could have been anything. Like his, it's also like, you know, whether or not to be in the Night's Watch and stuff like that, but where he had to make tough choices. So that's what I did there.
Yeah, good. If I can fanboy over Seven a little bit, I do love how much the range of emotions that we get just from 7 songs through all these characters. I mean, Cersei's kind of sad, and John has his emo boy conflictedness, and so, you know, Jim's defiant and all this stuff, and like listening to that is a big mood. Very big mood, because like I mean, everybody, I'm sure, I don't know if anyone else gets, but like when you hear a song, like you get a bit of like some chills, you know, which happened when I listened to Hamilton. Like I like listened to all of Hamilton, and it happened a whole lot, and a few almost tears. But with 7, like when you with half of like you sing like I need you more than ever, and I'm like, damn it. Feelings, really.
Yeah, so yeah, half the Cersei, when I decided I wanted it to be about her letter to Jaime, so she's in cells, and she's just at a really low point. So that was actually a big thing that I did too, was like, where's someone at like their absolute worst? Tyrion, it could have been like a fun, like witty thing, I suppose, because he's Tyrion, but instead I was like, when is Tyrion like the absolute worst? And it's like right after he killed his dad and Shay, and he's like just drunk, and that was like him sort of losing all of his composure, and that was what I found interesting about that. So yeah, like I hope that it conveys a sort of intense forward feeling.
Just a note on how you answered that. You've like actually answered my biggest question about 7, is whether in real life you pronounce it reprise or reprise.
Oh, well, because I do it both ways. Oh, because
I just heard her say reprise. Just heard her say reprise.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Yeah, keep going.
Yeah, also for Haley, I know nothing about music, but do you write the lyrics first and then fill it in with music, or do you write the music first and then fill in the lyrics?
It's a kind of little bit of both for me. Usually it's like, usually everything starts with notes and inspiration. So like with 7, when I like set myself goals of being like, I'm going to finish like a song a month, and then we're going to get it out like on the season 6 premiere date, and I like really like pushed myself to do that. But so for that I was like, okay, so this month I'm working on John, for instance, and I'm like, so I'm gonna make a playlist of just like inspo ideas for mood, and then yeah, I guess I mostly write lyrics first, but it's usually like sort of with guitar in hand, so there's like a sort of back and forth, and then once you get like, and this is sort of true of writing parody stuff, which I've found is
in parody you steal the music first and then
but no, what I was gonna say about that was, yes, that's true. What I was gonna say about that was, it's like once you get a verse and a chorus, just one, and you're like, okay, I see the direction this is going in, then I basically think about it as writing parody lyrics of my own music, like just to like continue. So I'm like, all right, so I have a verse and a chorus, and now I can just fill it in however I want. I know the rhythm, I know like all of this, and then maybe you add a bridge or some other weird thing, or you have some funny structure. Sometimes I steal structures from other songs. That's like one of my tricks when I'm stumped. I'll like be like, I love this weird song that doesn't have a chorus, and just like repeat some stuff at the end one time, and you never hear the same part again, and I'll be like, I'm just gonna steal that, just the shape, and then you fill it in with all your stuff. But I found that with writing actual parody too. It's like once you get the one, then you're just sort of like slotting it in. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that was with silly parodies. It's just like I got chunks of mine for different parts, and I was like, well, I gotta figure out something. So I remember there was a good chunk of it I was stumped, and then luckily I was working with Dom for the second part, and he's like, I got some things, and he threw in the line about San in that one. I'm like, I wouldn't have thought about that, and it stuck, and everybody loved it. But I wanted a quick follow-up. Do any of the other animals help you with the songs?
I do all the writing myself, but music and lyrics. But then once I write it, I usually just bring it to the band, and we like work out all the other stuff. Sometimes there's a production angle too, where like once you're in the studio, like some layers get put on it that are different. But usually it's mostly me. Sometimes they're like, why are there like 6 verses? And then I'm like, yeah, that's overkill, right? And like get rid of a few. But yeah, they're my editors, and also they give it life. So like often I'll be like, oh my god, this just like sounds like a dumb folk song with me, like with my like guitar, and I just like sound like lame. And as soon as I finish a song, I'm like, I'm not sure I even like it anymore, and I bring it to them, and it just like jumps to life because they rock it out. So that's
really
cool.
do this. Everybody who is not in here from the Mammals are also the bees and knees and very talented.
They are, and I will pass that on to them.
So, anything good?
He answered it. We steal lin-manuel Miranda.
Yeah, we find something we like and then we take it.
You're welcome.
I made this.
Enhanced it, really.
It's more than word steal.
Any other questions?
Yeah, anything else?
Actually, I have another question for Haley. Oh, I'm sorry. Somebody else?
Oh, I walked in late. I apologize if I missed this, but how did you guys, when you guys were doing the Hamilton parody, how did you decide who got what song?
Some people fought. The last.
You mean like who got to play what character, or what character got assigned?
What character got which Hamilton song?
Yeah, I mean, part of it was voluntelling a cast of 12 people into doing it, and some of that came with like, hey, so Chloe's gonna be Sansa, and she says Sansa needs the fields. So that led to a Sansa Hound, just shameless fan service song with Unkiss and all, and you know, that went very well. But yeah, actually, we touched on it earlier. It went through several rewrites where at some point other characters had then, who ultimately ended up with the songs, had them. Cersei became a much larger character as the musical progressed. She doesn't really have a big song on her own. We took that out. But she and Varys are just kind of part of all of King's Landing, and they're just permanent fixtures. Yes, and so they're in a lot of songs that way. So then it became a matter of, okay, who do we have who can just really, their character is going to have a big standout moment in a big old song, and then it occurred, oh, Dom's a really good singer, and he came to record his stuff in Florida, and when we sat down, it's like, all right, let's start with Stannis Refuted, and he sings his part, and it finishes, and he looks at me, and I had a weird look on my face. I guess he's like, "What?" I'm just like, "I'm just really happy this happened." It's really good.
He had the look like of the SpongeBob meme, like the "you like Krabby Patties, don't you?" He was just like.
Which, if I could talk about my recording method, because I don't have microphones or even a very good computer, so you don't want me to record my lines. Luckily, I didn't have too many, but I asked him if I wanted, like, because I'm like, do you want me to say them or sing them, or be like just kind of rough about them? He's like, just do them all. I'm like,
Do them all.
Okay. And I'm like, I'll just give them 2 of each. So I ended up doing it like 6 times. But my fun thing was I had the lines on my phone, and then I had voice recorder also open, and I just put a blanket over my head. And so I'm just with my phone, just this, and I'm like, all right, those are the lines. So I had to put it on and say my lines, and I did it, and just paused it, and then I'm like, all right, I did that song once, so doing it again, and this time I'm singing.
Yeah.
And so I did that 6 times in a night, and I sent it to Dean.
The version we used for most of it was the one that he had. It would be like line 4 singing, line 4 regular, line 4 gruff. Gruff is the winner.
Which like I had to make sure to do those last because like I was actually kind of like I was like I didn't like do like terrible like gruff thing, but I was like I didn't know.
Oh no, the gruff was great.
No, my single favorite line, my single favorite line in the whole thing is when Mo as the Hound goes, "We're on our own against the siege." Like that, obviously a rough cut. Yeah.
This touched on it actually. We were all spread across the country, or countries rather. We had a Canadian in there, and we actually did not get any chance to rehearse necessarily, but everyone was able to record their lines, send them in, and just kind of compile them as we went. It was just, here's a demo track, here's what it sounds like, just, give a best recording where it's just you. So have the headphones on as you're listening, record into the mic, and just send me just the vocal track. And I'm layering them all in Adobe Premiere and trying to get them synced up and all that. Very different from a traditional musical. For about one hot second, we were thinking about doing it live rather than pre-recorded. And then among other logistics, like not having enough microphones and everyone having to memorize their stuff, Skelly Night was the big determinant. There was just no way that 14 people were going to wake up on Friday and say, yep, I still have my voice and I'm able to get on stage.
I did want to try and record with I didn't have any songs with Meg, but I did want to record with Chloe because we had the one, and I was like, that'd be fun because I was like, I'll just drive over to Lansing. It's not like a couple of hours or whatever. But she was super sick. But I was like, that would like together. I thought it would have been like really cool, fun little experience, but it didn't happen. But y'all liked it on stage, so that was that.
Yeah.
Back
Yes,
to.
Sorry.
Or wait, are you dressed as Rhaegar?
Yes.
Skip you. No, Rhaegar. No,
I killed his dad. It's okay.
My question for Haley was, so in conceiving the songs for Seven, could you tell us about some characters that you maybe had conceptions for and it didn't work out, or you had a song and it didn't, you had an idea that didn't pan out?
Also curious.
Yeah. Let's see. Well, the ones who made it were my big ones for sure. And as I said, I almost was just like, I can't do Bran. Just like ripped it up and threw it away. But besides that, I honestly like the 7 were like it ended up sticking. But otherwise, as I said, I would have liked to do a Sansa one, and I feel like I sort of disrespected her in a way by not doing it. But then I've also had this idea that I have not done yet, but like it's been a bunch of notes, which is to write a little sort of follow-up prequel, which would be I wanted to give voices to some of the dead ladies from the past, to Lyanna and Ashara and Ilya, like people who really sort of get raw deals. And the tricky thing is though they don't have points of view to read, and that was a big part of me doing this, was that I felt like I wasn't disrespecting George's work by like putting words in their mouth per se, because I wasn't making them do anything that they don't do in the story. And so I felt like a little bit tentative about doing that with characters that don't have a lot to work with, like some lines here and there that we pieced together to really put together that story. But it might still happen. That's something I would still like to do.
Yeah. Brian is the one who did
In this room, stays in this room.
So just going off that last one, to say not putting words in characters' mouths. Now that World of Ice and Fire has come out, and a lot of characters in history, and so they may have been expanded upon. Have you thought about going back and checking those characters again?
Yeah.
10,000 ships.
Exactly.
There's definitely some stuff that I can turn to now, for sure. And I mean, there's still. There's definitely a lot that I can work with in terms of feeling, because like that's what I work off anyway. So for sure.
questions?
I would also like to petition for a second half.
A second
Yeah,
half of that.
Seven more.
Mine's number 7.
14.
Damn it. That's gonna be rough.
You know, I thought, like, you know, I was thinking about that because, yeah, I'm not going to make it. No one wants to, but we do want it. You know, but what is you were working on multiverse? I believe,
Yeah,
right now, which is
so-
a sci-fi thing.
Sort of, yeah. It's like it's sort of like a metaphysical like trip through a multiverse. That's once I wrote one concept album, I was like, why does anyone do anything but concept albums? Like, you can people like, what's the point when everything is like either like singles that you hear on like a spot like come up on Spotify or whatever? If you're gonna make an album, why not make it a full story? And so I've just been obsessed with that now. So that's what I'm doing right now. It's more personal than 7 of those 7 ended up being pretty personal because like you take like a feeling from the character and you're like, well, like I felt like that's like a universal thing, and so you insert like kind of your own elements into it, and it grows from there. And then I think hopefully that makes other people feel it too, because they're like, well, that feels universal, and that's what makes a song exciting. So this one is more like my little recent life story, but it's they go through different worlds. So each song is kind of its own little dimension, with like worlds that have zombies and worlds that have vampires and superheroes and things like that, kind of as emotional metaphors in the same way that the 7 stuff was. But it is a concept album writing is a crazy thing, because what ends up happening is like I get obsessed now with the last song, which is, as I said, what happened with 7. And I imagine that George is thinking the same way. Like the final thing is such a heavy thing when you're telling a story, and so unlike on a regular album in which like people just dump whatever crap like deep cuts like in the last few tracks, this is like, I'm like, no, this is important, this is the last one.
It's the climax.
Yeah, and then sometimes like I'll write one, I'm like, that's it, and then like 3 months later I'm like, nope, and then I have to do another one. Like I didn't get all the thoughts in. Yeah. So.
Actually, how different is the writing process between when you do comedic parodies like Harren Hall and doing the concept albums? Because you said earlier emotion, feeling is a big part of it.
Yeah.
What are some of the ways it's distinct when you're doing, say, a parody instead?
The parody, well, Harren Hall I wrote with my best friend Zoe from the band Thrill Driver, and we had, and then so we had this. That started out as a joke, like on our drunk podcast. Like for every week, we'd be like, you, like at the very end when everyone was wasted, we were like, you have to tell the story of Robert's Rebellion now, and she'd be like, and just be hammered at the end of our podcast. And then she was like, you know what? At the end of the season, I'm gonna wrap it. And it didn't end up happening because it was just a joke, and then a year later we actually did it. So that one, it was one of those like Google Doc writing situations between the two of us. When we decided which song we were going to parody, we picked the Beastie Boys, because Harren Hall scanned really like in a funny way with Sabotage. Like I just thought it was like Harren Hall, and we just went verse for verse, kind of. She had this idea of like when they scream, we'd yell "war" and then like just like break down all the battles. So that's just how it happened. And it was definitely a different writing process, but I mean, yeah, I suppose like once I get the hang of a rhythm, like it's a lot easier to scan stuff in.
Yeah, and it sounds like there is a common theme in this, and then that is, someone says, "Oh, we could do this as a joke." And
Yep.
a year later, we're doing it.
Yeah. Even 7 was honestly kind of a joke to me when I first started it. And then I was like, oh wait, no, this is dead serious. So, yeah.
We have time for one more question.
What about because like Haley also has a video that it's a mash of, I don't like Ed Sheeran very much. You made it them better, so I don't remember the name of the song.
Castle on the Hill.
I did it Ed Sheeran, because Ed Sheeran had his little bit part and sang Hands of Gold, so I mashed up that with Castle on the Hill and his song Castle on the Hill, and then my song Half about Cersei, so it became like a little story about like a Voluncar prophecy kind of thing. But yeah, so.
Yeah, just about the
real good.
process of
Zoe's a hand of that
yeah,
video too.
musically and lyrically mashed it, and like what.
Yeah, that was something that like I was like I want to. It was like all this summer when the show was happening. I was like, I want to like do a weird music thing every week and put it on the internet. And I was just, I don't know, I just had that idea that like that episode had just happened and everyone was talking shit on Ed Sheeran. And I was like, let me like redeem him a little bit and like make this tell a story. And like, so I I just put everything in the same key and or in the key of my song, so because I knew how to sing that way. Just I wanted to begin and end with Hands of Gold, and I don't know. It ended up just sort of falling into a kind of cool place where I felt like there was like an arc, and it was Cersei in my like fantasies, like end of Cersei's life, kind of, and like what she's thinking about her. Being a child and like competing to be seen, that was a fun one. But I wrote that like in a day, or put that together in a day. I didn't write it because it was like a mashup, but I put it together in a day. Like just asked who was around, and then we made a video the next day. And so yeah, it was a very quick turnover for that one.
Thank you all for coming. This was a fun panel. This has been Songs of the Smallfilk.
Yeah.
And have a great con.